just sit right there, tell you how I became the Prince of Calradia. West Valandia, born and raised, yo man is how I spend most of my days. Chilling with the skirmishes and that's kinda cool. Vibing up with the horses, ain't going to school. Couple of guys who up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. Got one little fight and my mom got scared. Stage moving with the bastards up in the terrier. Big with the pleaded with the day after day, but she packed my battery and sent me away. She gave me a horse and she gave me a grand. Did out on my own, immediately got canned. Never one pro, yo, this is so bad. Bolts in the quiver is all I really had. This is really what the whole game is like, cause bro, we don't know if it's gonna be right. What do you reckon? Got a couple more verses for you, bitch. Check it out, man. Yeah, whistle for a lord, and when he came near, said, tell me about the old-timey battle up in here. Anything I could say that this guy was weird, but I thought, nah, forget it. You're home, Calradia. Pulled up to my castle, level 108. Then I yelled to the homies, you open the gate. Looked at my kingdom, I was finally here. Sit on my throne as a Prince Calradia. Oh, boys and girls, I hope you like that little song. Let's get on with this video, eh? Check it out. Hey boys and girls, it's KnightStalker here. Welcome along today to today's video on Mountain Blade, Bannerlord. Check it out, man. First of all, I'm so sorry to make you listen to me singing, or I don't know, drowning a bag of saber-toothed tiger kittens, or whatever the hell that was. I promise, no more singing in this episode. So, today we're going to become the Fresh Prince of Calradia. And how, you might ask, does one become the Fresh Prince of such a fine, famed and storied land? Well, now sit back and relax, and let me tell you a story about a man whose name is known only to the dark gods and his mother, who are kind of the same thing, really. A man known only as Hero. Hero decided when he was a young man doing young man stuff like medieval nightclubs, horse racing, casual murder, stealing underwear, that he was really not going to get far in life as he really wanted to go unless he set himself up with a plan. And that plan that he was going to become great, a real Prince of Calradia. Picking up his crossbow, the only real weapon he intended to use through the entire quest, as if it's not hard enough already. He thought to himself, how does one become a prince? And of course the answer is that princes get drip and they get castles. Given that Converse and Gucci were still some years away from being invented yet, Hero decided the only way to become a prince was to own a castle. But there was just one problem. Hero was a massive introvert who liked staying at home and pretending that video games were not more than 2,000 years away from being invented. This, of course, was a problem. He liked his friends, but he really didn't like being around people for too long, or at least while he was sober he didn't. And this was going to be quite complicating to his journey to greatness somewhat, as he was going to be on his own pretty much the whole time. Well, not pretty much, just really the whole time. He thought that one day, when he has enough fame and people then wondered how he actually walked while having such massive balls, that he may indeed to employ a sidekick to maybe carry his purse or, I don't know, soak up arrows that would otherwise ruin his day. Hero was adamant he was going to go full realistic. He was definitely not going to save scum. He also vowed not to shoot 3 enemies and run away just to return an hour later, only to shoot 3 more dudes and then run away once more like he was French. If he had bolts in his quiver, he was honour bound not to flee before he had fired every single last shot. And so off he set on his magical journey to become the solo Prince of Calradia. Hero's first challenge was working out how exactly he was going to own a castle with nothing but a crossbow and a cross-eyed companion for backup. He figured he had a few choices. 1. He could become a multi-bajillionaire and simply buy a castle from some boomer who purchased like 4 castles back in the day when they were 300 gold or something. But he figured the property market was probably screwed anyway, and a millennial like him was going to have a hard time breaking in. Inflation was sure to ruin his savings long before he had any hope of achieving even a modest deposit. So too, he thought, what if he sucked up to the crowned boss of some hyper-capitalist border faction and climbed the corporate ladder? When he got to the point where his nose was so far up there that when the corpo faction had an excess castle to spare, he could simply put one on his expense sheet. Then, when the board met to vote for a budget allocation on another successful military-industrial campaign revolving around a thinly veiled economic benefit for the king, he could simply have the castle coded to capex, and boom, nice new throne. Thirdly, in the end, violence just may be the answer. The twang of the crossbow, the scent of fresh blood, the screams of the common people who simply wanted a college education and foolishly thought that the national militia would be a weekend job with a few benefits. Before being sent off to the Asarai Desert to die for olive oil. The simplicity of taking a castle off someone else was marred by the numbers game. He was alone, and one does not simply walk into Mordor. By that, he meant before he could even try and shoot the place up, how would he build a siege camp? Perhaps exploiting immigrant labour to build pointless siege structures that he would never even use before sending them away and not having to pay tax or benefits could be viable. And clearly cheaper. It's certainly an option. With all this in mind, Hero set off on an adventure. His first goal was to reach a tier of fame so that when he called, he wouldn't immediately be hung up on by the secretary of the local kingdom lords. He took time to begin to slay unfortunate and desperate bandits who really wouldn't have been driven to this kind of desperation if they had social security or that healthcare had been affordable in the first place. He pondered this ethical conundrum and he shot them in the head, one by one, and thinking, if only there was a better way. Perhaps more prisons is the answer. I should definitely lobby the king about that. Slowly, step by step, day by day, he started to grow his level, his gear, and his wealth as only the most motivated individuals can do, living the Calradian dream. He entered tournaments, he entered more tournaments, he shot bandits, he entered more tournaments, he shot more bandits, and it occurred to him that people really should go to medieval university, and that if they had only had a small loan of 1,000,000 dinars, then they too could have reached the very heights of power to which he aspired, well, long before now. But alas, he was born a common man, and so he entered tournaments, he entered more tournaments, he shot bandits, he entered more tournaments, and he shot more bandits. Soon, Hero had made something of a name for himself. His nom de guerre was known far and wide, at least 2 alleys over, and it was time for Hero to get a hobby and find some poor sap to carry his stuff. Doubling the number of targets enemies had to shoot at was neither here nor there. Honest. On a side note, Hero found some dirty old flag and hooked up the Britannian Corpo King. It's just a minor detail, no big deal, moving on. So Hero took up blacksmithing in his spare time, and of course it was a lot of spare time, because when you're out on your own, just the one of you, you tend to get poked full of holes left, right and centre, so logically, he spent a lot of time waiting in settlements for the gaping chest wounds and broken bones to heal overnight. A perfect match for his new lifestyle, and is a good money spinner too. A companion was found, and she was a mighty champion of truly mediocre siege warfare. Hero thought she could be a bit of a boon when it eventually came to assaulting high walls with nothing more than a threatening, bent stick with a piece of string and a box of angry toothpicks. Alas, Gertie was a terrible fighter and needed further, long training to become the meat shield that she was born to be. The path was set, and Hero rubbed his dirty little hands together in anticipation of sitting on a bigger chair than everybody else. Banditry was rife in the world, but Hero was no slouch and hunted down bandit camps one by one. Gertie held the entrance to ensure a retreat was possible if the worst happened and he took an arrow to the knee, but he found over time that a standard issue M4 crossbow became more and more deadly, with bandit camp after bandit camp falling to this lone solo fury and dedication to the cause of becoming the Prince team. He fought rock bandits, he fought sand bandits, he fought tree bandits, and of course he fought salty bandits, all who found themselves no match for his prowess with a high-powered assault crossbow. Investing in those high-capacity, full semi-automatic clips had really paid off. Nobody was going to tread on Hero. And so, dear listeners, the legend of Hero grew. His might and skill with repetitive actions and banal anti-banditry was second to none. Looters everywhere knew his name and feared it, whispering to their little looter children about the Botanian Baba Yaga, who came to snatch their parents away in seemingly unwinnable fights, stealing their boots, their head rags, and their decaying hose to sell for profit. Day after day after day after day, Hero willed the Corpo King to go to war and invade their neighbours, because that's where the money was to be made, and washing machines to steal. But the Corpo King was having none of it. War, he said. A war, Hero? We shall never go to real war, said the Corpo King. We are engaged in a special military operation, not a war. And so Hero joined the armies of the Corpo King and travelled around and around and around and around and around in circles. Mostly, the commanders of the army did not have any idea what they were doing. They got in the occasional fight and liberated small areas of the world, de-imperialising them while Valto grew stronger. After many months of stalemate, Hero's patience had run out. How was he to become a prince with a castle if there were no serious wars? The armies of the Corpo King had taken no new lands, and no castles to use his influence to snatch out from underneath others. Hero had little money he had saved by siphoning funds off from the military, feeding the troops stale MREs, and equipping troops with weapons from the warband era. But it was certainly not enough to buy a castle. He was still only one man with a companion. What was he to do? Hero's patience had run out, and he began to formulate a plan. Hero's plan went a little like this. He hired 100 or so poor, starving raw recruits, useful for nothing more than digging holes in irradiated dirt and chopping down trees, all to set up basic fortifications, paying them nothing more than the minimum wage, which hadn't gone up in more than 13 years, but he did allow them to keep the terrible tips they earned, so he figured it was a good deal. They just needed to stop having lattes and avocado toast, he said. It was their fault they were poor after all. They should have been born to rich appearance. So anyway, once these lazy peasant scum had dug him a few ditches and they'd set up some worthless log fortifications, he sent them away before the 90-day trial period ended, which of course meant he didn't have to pay them any benefits or redundancy, and voila, he was alone again. Peace and quiet to begin his lone assault on the castle. It did begin well, and then it didn't go so well. So he tried again. Making his way into the castle, he peered around the corner and that didn't go so well either. Hero gathered himself together and tried for the third time's the charm. He ran into the castle and closed the door behind him, locking the suckers out. Then he snuck into a fortified tower where he found a large bucket of pointy sticks. How handy, he thought. He fired again. And again and again. The spicy pew-pew twigs flew through the air and slew one, slew another, and slew many more, time after time after time. Once the dirty, filthy, ragged contents of the castle had been emptied out, it was only a matter of time until the filthy peasants at the gate were whittled down to nothing. And so, lo and behold, Hero single-handedly captures a castle. But the story does not end there, boys and girls. Oh no, no, no. He still had to convince the Corpo King and the board of directors that he truly deserved the castle that he had worked so hard for, pulling himself up by the bootstraps to become a Prince of Calradia. Fortunately for Hero, the board of directors saw it his way, and they voted and agreed that his overwhelming influence could be put to good use by giving him a castle, making him, at long, long last, a true Prince of Calradia. What are these guys doing? Got to keep an eye on things around here. Keep an eye on things? You're staring at the wall. You too, huh? And the floor. You can't even look me in the eye, can you? Look at them. They're stoned. Look at them. They are high as kites, guarding these two little things on the wall here. What the hell?